Son, life gets real quiet when the people you love the most stop looking at you the same way. I never thought I'd see that day. I raised my boy, Michael, with everything I had. Worked 2 jobs, missed meals, and sometimes slept in the car just so he could go to college. And when he finally made it, good job, beautiful wife, a big home, I thought, this is it. My boy made it. But I didn't know. Sometimes when children grow, their hearts don't grow the same way. It all started one ordinary evening. I was sitting alone in the guest room. My room. The one they said was perfect for you, Dad. It used to be their old storage room before they moved me in. I didn't mind. I told myself family means compromise. That night, the house smelled of roasted chicken, garlic bread, laughter. Everything that used to mean home. I waited. I thought maybe they'd call me to the table like they used to, but my phone buzzed instead. It was a text from my daughter-in-law, Emily. It said, "Dad, we already ate. Heat up the leftovers if you're hungry." Just words on a screen. But somehow they burned more than fire ever could. I stared at that text for a long time, my hand trembling. I walked to the kitchen, empty plates, used napkins, wine glasses. The leftovers were cold and lonely in a small plastic container, just like me. You ever felt invisible in a house you helped build? Tell me honestly, what would you have done if you were in my shoes that night? My friends, before I go further, if you've ever felt like your kindness was taken for granted, just leave me a broken heart in the comments. Because this story, it's not just mine. It's every parent who gave too much and got too little in return. But don't you worry, I didn't raise my voice that night. I didn't complain. I just heated up those leftovers quietly. Sat at the table while their laughter echoed upstairs. And I made a little promise to myself. One day, they'll understand what real warmth tastes like. So I started planning something. Not out of anger, but out of love. Because sometimes love has to teach, not just forgive. I didn't know then that one small act of kindness, one little thing I did next, would leave them speechless forever. That night, after I finished those cold leftovers, I sat on the porch. The sky was calm, stars scattered like little memories across the dark. I thought of my late wife, Mary. She used to say, "Don't let your heart harden, Jack. When people forget your worth, remind them. But kindly, kindly." That word echoed in my mind like an old song. So the next morning, when Emily came down, all cheerful in her fancy robe, I smiled. She looked surprised. Maybe she thought I'd sulk, or complain, or ask why I wasn't invited to dinner. But no, I just said, "Good morning, sweetheart. I made pancakes." She blinked, almost awkwardly. "Oh, you didn't have to, Dad. We were planning to order breakfast." I chuckled softly. "No worries. You can still order. I just thought I'd make some for the kids before school. See, they're 2 little ones, Lily and Ben. They loved my cooking. Those kids were my joy. The only ones who'd run to me with open arms every morning." So I flipped the pancakes, humming that old Sinatra tune Mary loved, and when the kids came down, they jumped right into my hug. "Grandpa, pancakes!" they shouted. That laughter, it filled the house more beautifully than any expensive breakfast ever could. Even Emily smiled, though she tried to hide it. And while I was cleaning the dishes, I made a quiet decision. If they'd forgotten my value, I'd remind them not by words, but by presence. I started doing the small things that made a big difference. When the lawn grew wild, I trimmed it. When the mailbox broke, I fixed it. When Emily's car refused to start one morning, I repaired it before she even called a mechanic. She thanked me, but in that half-hearted way people do when they're too proud to mean it. And still, I didn't say a thing. But something inside me shifted that week. I stopped waiting to be invited, stopped waiting to be seen. I started doing. And the house began to notice. One evening, when Michael came home from work, he looked around and said, Did you hire someone to clean the backyard? It looks amazing." Emily hesitated, then glanced toward me. Your dad did it." Michael turned to me, genuinely surprised. "You did that, Dad?" I smiled. "Well, someone had to. The grass was taller than Ben." He laughed. For the first time in months, my son laughed with me. It felt like old times again. like I was part of the house, not just living in it. But that peace didn't last long. See, Emily had guests coming over one weekend, her friends from her book club. Fancy folks who loved showing off their lives online. I overheard her telling Michael, "I don't want your dad around when they come. It's embarrassing. He sits in the corner, barely talks. It's just awkward." Embarrassing. That word. It hit hard. I sat in my room, pretending not to have heard. My chest felt heavy. For a moment, I wanted to pack my things and leave. But then I remembered what Mary said. Kindness, Jack. Always kindness. So instead, I decided to make that gathering unforgettable. In my own way. On the day of the party, while Emily was decorating and shouting instructions, I quietly went out back. I set up the old grill cleaned, oiled, and ready. The smell of charcoal filled the air. I started cooking ribs, corn, potatoes, all Mary's recipes. The aroma drifted through the backyard, sneaking into the living room where Emily's guests were sipping their fancy drinks. One by one, they came outside. "Wow, something smells amazing," one of them said. Emily stepped out, clearly surprised. "Oh, that's my father-in-law. He loves cooking." They all smiled at me. "You're quite the chef, sir." I laughed softly. "Just feeding the family, ma'am." Before I knew it, everyone was out there, talking, laughing, eating my food. The music got louder, the tension faded. Even Emily relaxed, smiling, almost proud. And when Michael raised his glass and said, "To Dad, for making this the best evening we've had in a while," I saw Emily glance at me with a look I hadn't seen before. Respect. Just a little. But it was there. That night, as I cleaned up the plates, Emily came over quietly. "Dad," she said, her voice softer than usual. "The food was amazing. Thank you for helping." I smiled. "Of course, sweetheart. That's what family's for." She nodded, hesitated, then walked away. It was small, but sometimes small cracks let the light in. And I thought maybe, just maybe, my quiet lesson had started working. But I didn't know the real test was still waiting. Something that would shake the whole family and show them who truly held this home together. You know, sometimes life waits for the right moment to test your patience, to see if your kindness is truly real or just an act. It was early autumn when it happened. The air had turned crisp, and the leaves outside the house were glowing orange, like small flames against the gray sky. I had just finished fixing the fence. The wind had knocked it loose, when I heard Emily shouting from the kitchen. "Dad, can you come here for a second?" I rushed in, thinking something was wrong. And there she stood, holding a broken plate in her hand, sauce all over the floor. The kids were watching from the stairs, scared. Emily snapped, "You left the stove on again, didn't you?" I blinked, confused. "I haven't cooked since morning, Emily. I was outside." She sighed dramatically, shaking her head. "I swear, this house is falling apart. You can't just touch everything and—" Before she could finish, Michael walked in, tired from work. "What's going on here?" Emily threw her hands up. "Your dad nearly burned the sauce. I told him to stay out of the kitchen when I'm cooking." Michael turned to me. "Dad, please, can you just rest? Emily's under pressure," and I nodded. "Of course, son. I'll stay out of the way." I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just walked back to my room and sat down quietly. And you know something, my friend? Silence can scream louder than words. That night, I looked around my little room. The faded family photo on the dresser, Mary's old blanket folded at the end of the bed. My heart ached. For the first time, I thought maybe I didn't belong there anymore. Maybe my time in that house was done. But before I could make any decision, fate stepped in. 3 days later, Michael had a big meeting out of town. Emily was alone with the kids. I offered to help, but she waved me off like usual. "I'll handle it, Dad." That evening, while she was upstairs doing laundry, I was in the backyard fixing the light near the porch. Then suddenly I smelled smoke. I ran inside. The kitchen was filling with gray clouds. Something on the stove had caught fire, a towel maybe too close to the burner. I grabbed the extinguisher, coughing, and put it out before it spread. Emily came running, panicked. "Oh my God, What happened? I could barely speak through the smoke. It's okay. I got it under control. She looked around, blackened pot, ash on the counter. Then she burst into tears. Michael's going to kill me. The kids could have been hurt. I put my hand on her shoulder. Hey, no one's hurt. That's what matters. She looked at me then. Not with anger, but something softer. Guilt. Dad, I'm sorry, she whispered. I blamed you for something like this just days ago. And now look at me. I smiled gently. We all make mistakes, sweetheart. What matters is what we do after them. She nodded, tears rolling down. I cleaned up the mess quietly, told her to go check on the kids. Later that night, when Michael called to check in, she told him everything, every detail. I could hear her voice shaking as she said, "If your dad hadn't been here, we could have lost the kitchen, maybe the house." Michael was silent on the phone for a long moment. Then he said softly, "Can you put Dad on?" When I took the phone, his voice cracked a little. "Dad, thank you. I don't know what to say." I smiled even though my eyes were wet. "Just say you're proud of me, son. That's enough." He laughed quietly through the phone. "You know I am." And that night, I felt something shift again. The walls of that house didn't feel so cold anymore. The next morning, Emily came into my room with a tray, pancakes, orange juice, coffee just the way I liked it. She smiled shyly. "I thought you could use some breakfast in bed." I chuckled. "Careful, Em, you'll spoil me." She laughed. And I swear, it was the first real laugh we'd shared. That day, when Michael came home early, the three of us sat together for dinner. No phones, no fancy dishes, just simple food, the kind that smells like family. And when Lily said, "Mom, Grandpa should cook every night," we all laughed. But deep inside, I knew something. Peace had returned, but only halfway. There was still something missing, the heart-to-heart my son and I had never really had. So I planned one last thing, something small but meaningful. A gesture that would remind them both what family truly meant. Because sometimes forgiveness isn't in words. It's in what you leave behind when the noise settles. And that final lesson, the one that would leave them both speechless, was just around the corner. You ever wake up one morning and just feel it? That something's about to change? That's how it was for me. The sun was shining through the curtains. Birds were chirping outside. But my chest felt heavy, like the air itself was thicker. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was something deeper. I've been feeling weaker lately, dizzy spells, shortness of breath. But I never told them. I didn't want pity. That morning, Emily came into my room, smiling like sunshine. "Dad, I'm making breakfast today. You rest." I smiled. "You sure about that? You know I've got a reputation around here." She laughed. "Yes, chef, I'm sure." So I sat back, listening to the sounds of laughter from the kitchen. Ben and Lily giggling, Michael joining in. The smell of bacon filled the air. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "Mary, look at them. They're happy again." And then I knew. It was time. Not time to leave, no. Just time to remind them one last time what family really meant. I spent that afternoon writing a letter. My hands shook a little, but I wrote carefully. Every word from my heart. I placed it in an old wooden box along with something precious. A faded photograph of me, Mary, and little Michael when he was just 5. His first fishing trip. We were smiling, soaked in rain, but happier than we'd ever been. That box, I decided, would be my lesson. That evening, when everyone was out in the yard, I quietly packed a small bag. Michael saw me and frowned. "Dad, where are you going?" I smiled. "Just for a few days, son. I've got an old friend up north. We used to fix cars together back in the day. Haven't seen him in years." Emily looked concerned. "You're going alone?" "Don't worry, sweetheart," I said softly. "You've got my number. I just think it's time for you two to have this home to yourselves for a bit." Michael frowned deeper. "Dad, you are this home." That line. Oh, that line almost broke me. But I hid my tears. "You'll understand what I mean soon enough, son." I hugged the kids tight, promised to bring them souvenirs, and walked out that door. But I didn't go far. I went to a small lodge just outside town. Quiet, peaceful, perfect for thinking. I asked the neighbor to deliver the box the next morning. And then I waited. The next day, Emily opened the door and found that wooden box on the porch with a note. For the 3 people who taught me patience, love, and the meaning of forgiveness. Dad. She called Michael immediately. It's from your dad. Should we open it? Inside, they found the photo first. And then the letter. I imagine Michael reading it aloud, his voice trembling. My dear son and Emily, by the time you read this, I'll be sitting somewhere by the lake, probably sipping bad coffee and missing you all already. Don't worry, I'm fine. I just needed a little air. And I wanted to leave you with this. You both have built a beautiful home. But a home isn't made of walls, it's made of warmth, the kind you give each other, and the kind you give back to those who helped you build it. Emily, I want to thank you. Truly. You've taken care of my son, given me beautiful grandkids, and filled this place with life. I know I was a bit of a shadow in the background sometimes, but that's what parents become. Quiet shadows who watch proudly from behind. And Michael, my boy, I'm proud of you. I always was, even when you didn't see it. I don't want your guilt, son. I just want your time. Not for me, but for your own family. Make sure your kids never feel what I felt sitting in that little room, waiting for a simple dinner invitation. And when you do sit together, when laughter fills this house again, know that's my gift to you. That's all I ever wanted. Love, Dad. Emily told me later they cried. Both of them. Michael called me that evening. His voice was thick with tears. Dad, you didn't have to leave. You're our family. You belong here. I chuckled softly. I know, son. But sometimes you have to step away so people can see the empty chair. He was silent for a long while. Then he said, please come home. And so I did. When I walked in that evening, the house smelled like dinner. Real dinner, not leftovers. Emily ran up to me and hugged me tight. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. For the texts, for the distance. I forgot what you mean to us. I smiled, tears in my eyes. No, sweetheart. You just needed a little reminder. We all do. That night we sat together, all of us, at the table. Ben told his silly stories. Lily kept stealing biscuits from my plate, and Michael just kept looking at me like he wanted to memorize the moment. And I thought, this is family. Not perfection. Just love, forgiven and reborn. But the story doesn't end there, because a week later something happened, something small, but it showed me that my lesson had truly reached their hearts. You know, I've learned something about life. It's not the big moments that change people, it's the quiet ones. The small gestures that sneak into the heart and stay there forever. A week after I came back home, everything felt lighter. Emily smiled more. Michael came home earlier from work. The kids would barge into my room every morning, jumping on my bed like it was Christmas. But there was one moment that told me my message, my quiet lesson, had truly sunk in. It was a Saturday morning. I was sitting in the garden, trimming the roses Mary had planted years ago. The air smelled of rain and fresh earth. That's when Lily came running toward me, clutching a small bowl in her tiny hands. Grandpa! She shouted, her curls bouncing. Mom said breakfast's ready. I smiled. Oh really? What are we having? She giggled. Leftovers. I froze for a second, surprised. But before I could say anything, Emily appeared behind her, holding 2 plates. She smiled softly. We thought it was time to give your old joke a happy ending. She placed the plates on the table, but they weren't leftovers. Not really. They were my favorite. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes and sweet corn, all fresh and steaming. I laughed, shaking my head. You remembered. Emily nodded, her eyes misty. How could I forget? The night I told you to heat up leftovers. I didn't realize I was the one serving a cold heart. You never said a word, Dad. You just kept giving. I'll never forget that. I looked at her, truly looked at her. Not the woman who once hurt me, but the daughter I never had. And I'll never forget the day you learned to serve warmth instead, I said softly. Michael joined us then, sitting beside me with 2 cups of coffee. You know, Dad, he said, smiling, you've changed this whole house. Even when you were gone for a few days, it felt empty. Now it feels right again. I sipped my coffee and looked at him. I didn't change the house, son. You did. You just needed a little reminder of what love sounds like. He chuckled. Yeah. You and your quiet lessons. We all laughed. Even the kids joined in, though they had no idea what we were talking about. But I'll tell you something, my friend. In that moment, watching my family laugh together, I felt Mary's presence so strongly. It was like she was sitting right next to me, smiling that proud, peaceful smile she always had. Later that day, Michael took the old photo from the box, the one from that rainy fishing trip. He framed it and hung it in the living room right above the fireplace. Where everyone can see it, he said, because that picture is where this family began. And every time someone visited, friends, neighbors, even Emily's book club, they'd always ask about that photo. And she'd tell them proudly, "That's my father-in-law, Jack, the heart of our home." I never thought I'd hear her say that, but there it was, truth wrapped in love. That night, when everyone was asleep, I sat by the window with my old photo album, flipping through memories. I whispered quietly, as if talking to Mary again. You were right, love. Kindness always finds its way back. And maybe that's the lesson I want you, the one listening right now, to take from my story. Because maybe you've been hurt too. Maybe you've been forgotten, ignored, or pushed aside by someone you love. Maybe you're sitting in silence, waiting for them to see your worth. But let me tell you something, from one old heart to another, don't let their coldness turn your warmth into bitterness. Teach them, but gently. Love them even when it's hard. Because love, real love, doesn't shout. It whispers. And those whispers, they echo for generations. You see, now every Sunday my family gathers around the table. The kids help set the plates, Emily cooks, Michael tells bad jokes, and they always save the seat at the end for me. And every time Emily serves me a plate, she smiles and says, "Not leftovers, Dad. Never again." And I smile back because I know the lesson lasted. So if you're listening to me right now, my friend, tell me honestly, have you ever been taken for granted by the ones you love? And did you choose anger or kindness? If you chose kindness, then trust me, you've already won. Red Heart.